Hi, it's Dr. Shook. It is Saturday, September the 12th of 2015, and today we're going to talk about leaky gut syndrome. So leaky gut is something that you may or may not be familiar with. A lot of people, if you're just doing some research and you've come across my video here in the 11th sauna session, then this may be the first time you've heard of leaky gut syndrome. But here's what leaky gut is. It is where the small intestinal lining, the inside, becomes inflamed. Through that inflammation, it becomes porous or develops permeability, where things inside the small intestine will leak into the bloodstream. So this process, in the scientific literature, you can look it up, and it's called intestinal permeability. What we know today is that it is the cause for a number of different disease processes. So what we found and what the literature shows us is that the number one process that leaky gut contributes to is autoimmunity. So a number of autoimmune conditions. We know that through the leaky or permeability of the gut, that foods, bacteria, waste products of bacteria, food proteins, and a number of other things that should stay in the GI tract and go from the small intestine into your large intestine and then be passed out through your stool are now actually able to leak through the intestinal wall into the bloodstream. Now we know that this creates a lot of problems. For one thing, it will trigger an immune response. And the immune response, I'm not going to go into all the mechanisms here because this would be a 15-minute video. But the immune response is how, when you have an immune response to primarily food proteins or other proteins from cellular debris or other types of bacteria that are in the gut that leak into the bloodstream, it can trigger autoimmunity through a process called molecular mimicry or cross-reactivity. And you can Google those terms. You can look at some of my other videos where I explain that in detail. But that's the leading theory on autoimmunity. And we know that when we support the leaky gut, we identify the drivers of leaky gut, which there are numerous drivers, that when we work to remove those, we support the healing of the gut, and we focus on gaining regulation of the immune system, that we can make incredible changes in a lot of people's lives that have autoimmunity, who have been told there's nothing that can be done except to take some of these, basically immune suppressing medications, steroids, and anti-inflammatories, which, by the way, those are a lot of the things that actually contribute to leaky gut. Because a lot of people will say, well, why are we just hearing about this? Well, first of all, we're just now understanding the mechanisms behind how autoimmunity and a lot of these chronic processes happen because of research and study, right? We didn't have this science and this knowledge years ago. But since the 50s and 60s, when antibiotic use has just basically become a very rampant and commonplace thing that's prescribed for everything, from children's ear infections to the chronic, a common cough, to anything where you go in, doctors are prescribing them. And so we have this overprescription of antibiotics, which should, and a lot of experts will say this as well, they should be reserved for basically hospital level care. You have to be admitted to the hospital to get them. Because here's what happens. See, these antibiotics that are prescribed for all of these things, many of which are viral, which don't respond to antibiotics, at least not directly, what ends up happening is that it wipes out your gut bacteria. The gut bacteria is a good thing. Most of the gut bacteria is good. You can have overgrowth of some types of bacteria, and that's not a good thing. But the antibiotic wipes out everything. And what it does is that is protective. That is a protective group of bacteria in your small intestine that help you. And it helps to protect your gut. So wiping it out with antibiotics can promote leaky gut. Probably the biggest perpetuator of leaky gut are NSAIDs, which are those non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So you're talking about all those ibuprofens and Advils and these other medications that have their NSAIDs. One of the main side effects of those, what is it? Intestinal bleeding, ulcers, right? So how does that occur? Well, it occurs through thinning of your gut wall, of your gastric lining. And what does that do? makes it leaky, makes it permeable. And how many people take those? Millions, right? And overdose on them. So we know that those are a big contributor. We know that these some of the steroids that are prescribed are big contributors. And that's what's really changed since the 50s or 60s. But what really needs to happen is that there need to be a lot tighter controls on some of these medications that are perpetuating immune system problems, endocrine, your hormonal system problems, an overburden of the liver, and an overburden of your lymphatic system. All that occurs as a result of leaky gut. So many things that we could talk about with leaky gut. Really, the bottom line comes down to is you have to understand that this is a process that we now know occurs. We know that it is the main contributor and one of our main focuses when you're talking about autoimmune conditions. And the autoimmunity is at epidemic levels in the United States. So, look, if you have an autoimmune condition or if you have chronic inflammation, you've got to identify why. And that's, when a lot of people come to my office, one of the things that we focus on is testing. I mean, we do a lot of very advanced testing. But how else are you going to know what's causing the problem? I mean, really, you're guessing if you don't do the test. So what we do is we do a lot of advanced immune system testing through, the best labs in the world. And through the study of functional medicine, I've been fortunate enough to learn about these different tests and learn about a lot of the drivers of leaky gut. And once you identify what's going on through testing, then you can properly recommend ways to remove the problem, to support healing, and to gain regulation of your immune system again. We see this leaky gut it feeds through in almost all chronic health conditions. Autoimmunity, absolutely, it plays a big role. Diabetes absolutely plays a big role. So we see it quite often, and it's something that I want to talk about again because I'm going to do a few more videos on leaky gut so that we can go a little bit deeper into some of these other areas, like, for example, how your hormones that it's your liver's job to detoxify. Your liver breaks them out of the bloodstream and then empties them into your GI tract through the gallbladder, okay, in the form of bile, okay? So the bile goes into the small intestine. It helps to break down food so you can absorb it. But here's the thing. If you don't have good bacteria in your small intestine, guess what? You don't break down the bile, and the bile passes into the colon, and it causes inflammation in the colon because it has to be broken down in the small intestine before it gets to the colon, or you're going to have inflammation of the colon. And it can contribute, and a lot of people think it could be a cause of colon cancers. So the other thing is those hormones, if it's not broken down, if the bile and the hormones are cleared out of the blood through the liver, and those hormones are passed into the small intestine, and that is where it is broken down, it's biotransformed, and it's supposed to go out of your body through your colon and be eliminated through your stool. Well, if that can't be broken down, and you have a leaky gut wall that's supposed to keep everything in the colon, guess what happens? You can leach, or those hormones can be resorbed. They can be absorbed back into the bloodstream. So you're not clearing them out. Your liver detoxifies them out of the bloodstream, dumps them into the colon, into your small intestine. The small intestine, as it's passing through, the hormones just absorb back into the bloodstream, and you got this cycle of accumulation of hormones. There are so many problems that when you start looking at the physiology and you start studying how it all works together, and not just looking at one system in an isolation or one laboratory marker in isolation, you start to figure out very quickly that our bodies, thank God we have specialists that can look very closely at one system for disease of that system. But you have to understand how these systems work together and how they're all dependent, because our body doesn't function individually with these individual systems that way. I mean, when you start looking at chronic disease processes, you have to look at it this way. There's just no other way to do it that I know of or that I've been exposed to. If there was, that's what I'd be talking about today. So I wanted to share leaky gut with you and discuss a lot of its consequences to your health. So I'll be posting other videos in the future, but I hope you guys find this informative and helpful, and I hope it helps you to take your health back and become empowered. I'm Dr. Shook. If you have any questions or you need anything, let us know. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks.
Hey guys, Dr. Shook, thank you for viewing our videos. I hope they help you out. If you want to, just subscribe to our channel somewhere here. You can watch a video that YouTube's actually selected for you, so hopefully it'll help you out. If you need any other information or resources, just look in the description. We've got links to our website, to our 9 lab test guidebook, and everything else that we do. I really appreciate you, and I hope you guys have a great